An act to amend the Copyright Act in matters of diagnosis, maintenance, and repair. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. Please forgive my appearing on Zoom today at a distance. I would have much preferred being with you in Ottawa today, but unfortunately I was unable to join you. So for this first hour of our meeting,
Vehicle Manufacturers Association, Brian Kingston, President and Chief Executive Officer. We have Jennifer Steeves, Director, Industry and Consumer Affairs. From LKQ Corporation, we have Tyler Blake Threadgill, Vice President, Government Affairs, and Derek Wilshire, Regional Vice President for Canada. And finally, from the North American Equipment Dealers Association, we have John Schmeisser, President, and Eric Wareham, Vice President, Government Affairs. So thank you all for joining us today. It is much appreciated. And without further ado, I will cede the floor to the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, honourable members, thanks for the invitation to appear here today as part of the committee study of Bill C-244, an act to amend the Copyright Act. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers, CVMA, is the industry association representing Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty motor vehicles. Membership includes Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, FCA Canada. Canada's auto industry is responsible for over $13 billion in annual economic activity, 117,000 direct jobs, and an additional 371,000 jobs in aftermarket services and dealership networks in 2020. The industry is Canada's second largest export sector, with over $36.5 billion in exports last year. The CVMA has been a strong supporter of the Canadian Automotive Service Information Standard, CASIS, since its inception 12 years ago. CVMA members are industry leaders providing vehicle repair information and tools to the aftermarket at a level equivalent to their respective independent authorized dealers to ensure that Canadian vehicles are repaired to OEM specification to the benefit and protection of the consumer. Over the past few months, our members have reviewed and submitted recommended updates to the CASIS website to ensure technicians have up-to-date links to our members' respective technical information portals. Regular CASIS task force meetings provide an opportunity to bring forward details about any issue that is being encountered by the aftermarket for further study and collaboration on solutions. Safety is automakers' number one priority, and OEMs are responsible to ensure vehicle safety systems comply with the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, MVSA. Vehicle safety technologies provide societal benefit. They may save lives, including that of the driver, other passengers, and the surrounding environment, including other motorists and pedestrians. Vehicle emission systems must also comply with federal regulations under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, SEPA. Modification to a vehicle's emission system may put a sensor out of alignment, resulting in compliance issues due to increased emissions, and it may also affect fuel consumption. Allowing unrestricted access to vehicle safety and emission system software that is not required to complete a repair introduces significant compliance and safety risk in the event a modification results in a system not operating as originally designed. CASIS ensures that repairs are done safely and in compliance with the MVSA and SEPA, among other regulatory frameworks that OEMs are applied to. Cybersecurity is another top priority for industry, and data protection and data privacy are embedded from the earliest stages of product development. OEMs invest and include security measures beginning at the design process and throughout the automotive ecosystem, and abide by rules that govern cybersecurity management. Circumvention of a vehicle technology protection measure, a TPM, and the modification of vehicle system firmware may undermine cybersecurity protections, making vehicles more vulnerable to hacking. Automated vehicle and connected vehicle technologies, driver assist systems, and the transition to an electric fleet with charging infrastructure require an increasingly vigilant approach to cybersecurity. As noted in the 2020 Transport Canada report, Canada's Vehicle Cybersecurity Guidance, a cybersecurity breach, whether deliberate or accidental, could have adverse consequences such as compromising vehicle safety, unauthorized access of confidential information, and vehicle theft, among others. Context is critical here. The consequences of allowing unrestricted modification of motor vehicle firmware and certain software are more serious than compared to other consumer goods, which we understand is the intended focus of this bill. As the committee continues its study of C244, we strongly recommend the committee hear from a cybersecurity expert to receive a briefing about cybersecurity threats as related to vehicle security safeguards, including measures to protect the integrity of vehicle systems. We also recommend inviting an appropriate Transport Canada official who could provide input to the committee from a road safety and motor vehicle regulation perspective, as well as an Environment and Climate Change Canada official who could speak to the importance of vehicle system integrity related to fuel consumption and emissions compliance. So in closing, the CVMA remains committed to the CASIS model, which has been working for over a decade and may serve as a model for other industries to adopt. We urge the committee to continue its detailed review, hear from the vehicle cybersecurity and safety experts, and continue to engage with CVMA as this study moves forward. With that, pleased to take your questions, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you. So I'm temporarily in since our chair's computer is apparently frozen. So I will go to the next witness, the LKQ Corporation.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable members, I'm Derek Lefire. I'm the Regional Vice President of LKQ Canada. I'm with my colleague, Mr. Tyler, who's the Vice President of Federal Affairs. I would like to thank you for giving us a chance to speak to this bill, an important bill that aims to improve the right to repair vehicles. It's important to move forward on this. It's needed. Small businesses and consumers, in particular in rural regions, will be negatively impacted if no action is taken at this time. We invite you to look at the brief that we have filed on this bill for further details. LKQ distributes quality repair parts as well as complete services for diagnosis and calibrating throughout Canada and the United States. We're also the largest recycler of automobiles and car parts, about 7,000 a year in North America. We have 11,000 and some employees over 27 sites across Canada. I work in Lévis, near Quebec City, and about 92 men and women are part of my group, my family, I like to say. We have many employees working in the secondary aftercare market services. Of course, for Canadians, after you buy your house, buying a car is one of your most important purchases. Car owners, or rather cars, can nevertheless be difficult to upkeep. What we've heard from most of our clients is that more and more consumers have less and less choice as to where they can look for aftermarket services. According to the Canadian Automobile Alliance, 70% of repairs take place on the independent secondary aftermarket service market. So we're here to ensure that an update of legislation ensures that Canadians continue to have a choice. The CASIS approach is outdated, given that we are now using technology that did not exist when it was brought in. Consumers need and deserve a dynamic aftermarket service market that allows them to choose when and how to upkeep their vehicles. And this is the aim of this bill. My colleague Tyler will speak to some of the obstacles.
My name is Tyler Threadgill. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for LKQ Corporation, working across Canada and in the United States. Thank you for having us here today to share our thoughts on this important piece of legislation. Bill C-244 is integral to protecting not only Canadian consumers, but Canadian small business owners. Our goal is to develop a framework that allows repair and maintenance data to be shared with the automotive aftermarket and a vehicle owner's repair shop of choice. Specifically, we believe the inclusion of a right to repair regime for the automotive diagnostic repair and service sector is imperative to keep up with the ever-changing automotive industry. As Derek alluded to, in 2009, the CASIS agreement was reached, which would allow the automotive aftermarket to access important repair and maintenance information. Similarly, a memorandum of understanding was reached by the same parties in the United States about 5 years later. However, there were unforeseen flaws in this agreement. They did not account for various technological advances. For instance, when these agreements were signed, in order to access vehicle data, a computer needed to be plugged into a car. Now, vehicle data is sent through telematics system, which transmits data wirelessly to a server managed by the manufacturer, a process that was not around when these agreements were signed. To remain up to speed in this technologically evolving landscape and safeguard access to vehicle data by the independent aftermarket, Bill C-244 should take into account the following concepts. Vehicles compile extraordinary amounts of data, like where you go and how fast you drive. A lot of personal information. I want to be very clear. We do not want that information. What we are looking for is the aftermarket to have access to the vehicle repair and maintenance data necessary to repair a car. Cybersecurity is another key component to consider. This data needs to be sent in a safe, readable format for all technicians to access. I'd like to reiterate the industry's goal. We are asking for legislation that maintains the historical status quo in repair and maintenance market. This is a time of tremendous technological advancement. It is critical that legislation keeps pace to ensure Canadians' choices and rights remain protected. Thank you again for your time. We welcome any questions and look forward to working with you on this important issue.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to the North American Equipment Dealers Association for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the INDU committee members for the invitation to appear before you today to discuss Bill C-244. The North American Equipment Dealers Association Canada has represented farm equipment dealers in the country since 1927. In addition to the over 850 farm equipment dealers across Canada that we represent, we also have many construction, material handling, forestry, and outdoor power equipment dealers as members. We're also here today on behalf of our sister organization in Quebec, AMAC, which have represented dealers in that province since 1949. Our farm equipment dealers directly employ over 20,000 people across the country. For the most part, our members are located in rural areas, and in a lot of cases, our equipment dealers are the largest employers in these rural communities. We want to be very clear that farm equipment dealers in Canada support the customer's right to repair their own equipment, and no one has taken away a farmer's right to repair their own equipment. This is a relationship-based business, and our dealer's success is dependent on our customer's success. This is also a very highly competitive business, and if a dealer doesn't take care of the customer, they will take their business elsewhere. To show how we support a customer's repair, I'd like to share the industry commitment that OEMs and dealers have made to the customer. OEMs offer our farmer customers access to error or fault codes, plus the same repair manuals, diagnostic equipment, special tools, training, and parts that are available to dealers. Should a farmer or a third-party repair shop wish to purchase them, they are available from all the major manufacturers who have signed on to this industry commitment. And with this industry commitment, 98% of the repairs can be performed by farmers or third-party repair shops. The remaining 2% of repairs involve access to safety or emissions criteria or may need a software reset. Another part of our industry commitment is our Repair Done Right initiative, where we train dealership employees on what is available in the marketplace. This is to ensure that our staff and our customer knows what's available to support their repair. Dealerships invest millions in parts inventory and technician training to support customer repair. Additionally, our association has spent over $3.5 million in the last few years on capital projects for technician training at some of Canada's finest post-secondary institutions, and we have awarded over 1,200 scholarships to dealership technicians to upgrade their training. We do this because it's not only good business, but it's critical that when a machine is down, our dealership staff know what the problem is and can fix it right the first time. An independent survey showed that 56% of the parts we sell are installed by someone other than the dealership. So we clearly do not have a monopoly on repair. And that same survey showed that independent repair shops, in many cases, are the top parts customers of our dealers. What we don't support, though, is modification. And Bill C-244 would open the door to modification that has negative consequences to the environment and safety concerns. Our dealers report many instances of customers altering the emission systems on their off-road equipment in an effort for better fuel economy and performance. However, this violates the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and there's a lack of enforcement in this area. If Bill C-244 passes in its current form, this will open the door to widespread altering of emission systems, as there will be open access to the software. Additionally, access to the software will create many safety hazards. As an example, a tractor's brakes are designed for a maximum speed of 40 kilometers per hour. However, with access to the software, that speed can be increased to as high as 70 kilometers per hour. That speed makes both the tractor unsafe and a hazard to the public. Allowing access to farm equipment software also creates a cybersecurity concern. Most modern farm equipment has remote access and diagnostic capabilities. Already, we have hackers who are boasting about their attempts to remotely shut down tractors. Opening up access to the software will put Canada's food supply chain at risk. Earlier this year, John Deere was able to remotely disable tractors that were stolen in the Ukraine by Russian troops. If proprietary code is allowed to be accessed, this could put control of the units in the hands of others with possible disastrous consequences and national security risks. Because of these reasons, we oppose Bill C-244 in its current form. It doesn't take into consideration the industry commitment that supports customer repair and has unintended safety, environmental, and cybersecurity consequences for the Canadian agricultural industry. We welcome MP Miles' comments that he was willing to entertain amendments to the bill with respect to our industry, and we have submitted draft language that would exempt our construction and agricultural industries. Our industry has stepped up to support a customer's right to repair their own equipment. I hope you agree that an industry solution is preferable to a legislated solution. Thank you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmeiser. We'll now turn to Mr. Perkins to start the discussion for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing. I'd like to explore, Mr. Schmeiser, if I've said it right, a couple of the points that you raised. The last one on modification, maybe you could explain that a little more. I mean, it would surprise me that somebody would pay $1 million for a piece of farm equipment and then try and fix it themselves and modify it. What are some of the modifications that you do see and the impact of that on the equipment?
There's two. The first one is the installation of a DEF delete kit, typically on off-road diesel engines, and that gets around the emissions standards that have been set in the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and that is illegal. But we have reports from some of our dealers that in their trade area that there's as many as 50% of the farm equipment out there has a DEF delete kit installed on it. So the problem there is there's no enforcement. The second issue is chipping and tuning, and that is the installation of a chip to increase the horsepower of a tractor or combine. It's not illegal, and a customer can do whatever they want with their farm equipment after they purchase it. However, that does void the warranty with the manufacturers. The manufacturers make that very clear that any alteration from the OEM standard is a violation of the warranty. So there is a risk that comes with both of those things. Either on one hand, it's illegal or it voids your warranty, and then there's a downstream effect. 95% of the equipment that our dealers sell involves a trade. And so if a dealer takes in a piece of equipment that has been altered or chipped, and then sells it to another customer, well, who's actually liable if a transmission or an engine blows up because it's chipped? But those are the two primary issues: DEF delete kits installed and chipping and tuning.
You're altering the horsepower. You're also impacting, presumably, the transmission and its ability. There has been discussions about whether or not this bill breaches provisions of CUSMA. So I'm just wondering, maybe briefly, each of the witnesses, Mr. Kingston, or each of the three groups, starting with Mr. Kingston, would want to comment on that aspect.
Can't give a definitive answer. I would recommend that Global Affairs Canada trade officials be engaged on that question. There are commitments and requirements through CUSMA with respect to things like intellectual property. So I think that needs to be investigated further.
I think we would agree that can't say for certain one way or another whether it would, but would be happy to work with you and other members to get a definitive answer there.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Kingston's comments. I would add, though, that this process, when we're looking at the classes of works represented here by auto manufacturers, and farm equipment. We're going to hear, and you'll hear from many other products, that this is sort of an all-encompassing piece of legislation. It doesn't distinguish between an airplane or farm equipment or a cell phone, and those have very different characteristics. And so I will say that in other markets, generally speaking, there's a deliberative process that makes a distinction amongst classes of work where individuals can petition for exemptions from copyright protections for the purpose of repair and maintenance, and that it's not as blunt of an instrument as this legislation would be. It's more, a scalpel to dissect amongst classes of work in a more deliberative way, with safeguards in place for some of the concerns that have been raised here.
Obviously, with commercial vehicles, there may be a little bit of a different consideration. I'm going to turn the rest of my time over to Mr. Viss.
Thank you, Mr. Wareham. I just want to continue on that point. Do you believe, looking at the current legislation, that there is a way to get around that all-encompassing approach that you just referenced through an amendment?
That's a great question. I think there's, in these other markets that I referenced, there's a process by which different products or proponents of products that want to seek an exemption of technological protection measures for the purpose of repair and maintenance, they would initiate the petition and then have the evidentiary record of explaining why their rationale for why they need that.
So right now, in the context of what's before us today, C-244, as you mentioned, it is all-encompassing legislation. And what I'm hearing, and from equipment dealers in my riding, is that there is some major consequences to what's at play here. Have you submitted possible amendments in good faith to this committee?
Yes, we have.
And what were your general recommendations about a way to get around some of the challenges that we're hearing right now?
Well, I think it's, you have it in your evidentiary record that we submitted to you. We could talk more, I think, in detail about those amendments. Right now, they kind of list, it's a list of products, but I think that may be somewhat.
Thank you. Mr. Kingston, quickly, can you differentiate between a modification and a repair and define both, if possible?
Yes. So we do see modifications similar to what was mentioned by my colleagues from the associated equipment dealers with respect to things like chipping. So those are the types of modifications that you see occurring in vehicles and that can cause.
Sorry, what is a modification?
Well, modification would be that circumventing a system that is in place to protect and keep the vehicle compliant with SEPA regulation. Okay. For performance reasons, for example. So that does occur. Repair is what we see through cases where automakers and the aftermarket share information with respect to diagnostics and doing repairs on a vehicle and ensure that both a dealer and an aftermarket can do those repairs.
Under the current version of this legislation, that it would encompass modifications as well as repairs?
It's not clear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Viss. We'll now turn to Mr. Fillmore for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for your time and sharing your experience today. It's clear that we've got kind of two perspectives from the panelists today, and our job is to understand those two perspectives and try to navigate down the middle there and try to make sure everybody's position is covered. I want to start by saying that the author of the legislation and the previous author of the previous legislation are both really clear that this is legislation that is founded on the right to repair, not the right to modify, not the right to harvest data. It's really about repair. It's about really respecting in a technological context the evolution of your industries, the parties to cases, in a way that I think that they have been left behind by cases right now. So the concern about modification, obviously we don't want to. You painted some dire pictures there, Mr. Schmeiser. But is there any? Where is that coming from? I have to say, it seems a little overstated, given what's actually in the bill. This is really about right to repair. What is causing your concern that there might be these modifications from these honorable parties to cases?
Well, our concern is really based on what we're seeing already happen in the industry, where if a dealer reports to me that over 50% of the equipment is already modified, this legislation really opens the door to open access to the software so that we could look at 100% of the farm equipment out there violating the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. Now, I don't think that's good for the economy. It's good for the industry. I don't think it's good for agriculture. And same thing on shipping. We are seeing this, and we come here with a message of there's a lack of enforcement on the emission standards controls that are in place. And so, if that isn't looked at and this legislation passes in its current form, I think we're going to have a worse problem on our hands than what we do.
The committee has heard testimony that, I'll just give you one example. It was the owner of a Volvo who could no longer take the Volvo to the neighborhood repair guy and instead had to go for many times the price to the dealer. Do you think it's possible that in the context of this sort of increasingly tight hold by the manufacturers on the technology, that one of the outcomes of that could be that people are actually seeking these because of the heavy hand of the restrictions, seeking the modifications?
Sure. And I can't speak for colleagues sitting at the table here, but I can't speak for our industry, and our industry commitment is very, very clear. A third-party repair shop or a farmer customer can get access to the same tools, diagnostic tools, special tools, training modules, aero codes, everything that a farm equipment dealer can get right now. Now, they have to pay for it, fair enough. But we've stepped up as an industry to make this available to assist our customers in the repair. And part of the reason why we do that is we have a workforce development challenge within our industry. We can't find enough mechanics. No matter what we've done and what I stated earlier in providing scholarships and training, we still need to fill that void. So it's in our best interest for the customers to be able to repair their own equipment. And that's why we support them with this industry commitment.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to come to LKQ if I could. CASIS. Can you just characterize the current, from your perspective, the current state of CASIS, and does it need to be updated, and what are the weak points?
Sure, thank you for your... Oh, sorry. Am I on? Okay. There you go. Sorry about that. Thank you for your question. First of all, it's a voluntary agreement. It needs to be enforced. And again, I think we stated clearly that a lot of the technology has evolved, and we're good with that. That's great. But anything that's transmitted right now on servers is not accessible through the OBD2 port. 60% of cars have this new technology. We believe that before 2030, 95% of those cars are not going to be. So it would need to be mandatory. It would need to be rewritten and tightened up a little, my humble opinion. Tyler?
Yes, I would add, it would also need to have real enforcement mechanisms. Unfortunately, with it being voluntary, not every manufacturer is a part of it, and there's no requirement that they be there. And then if they are not following it, there's no real enforcement for that. So do we think there's a path forward for CASIS? There could be, but it would need to be, as my colleague mentioned, very much strengthened, made mandatory, and given some actual teeth.
If that were to, I'm just looking at the chair to see if I can go. If that were to happen, would your group be amenable to some of the amendments that the manufacturers are talking about to circumvent TPMs? Is there a middle ground here between CASIS and what the manufacturers want, do you think?
Sure. I think as we've stated, the importance for us is that repair and maintenance data is made available. We are not interested in all of the other data that's out there. We also are very concerned about safety. All right? I mean, nobody wants their car to be repaired and not done in a safe fashion. So I think the concerns that are mentioned, we would share. What we want is true right to repair, a regime that allows consumer choice and option, because the average car on the road now is over 12 years old. So most people, it's a second or third or fourth owner vehicle. There needs to be choice, and people need to have the option of whether they go back to the manufacturer or go to their local mechanic.
Is the historical status quo for your members to repair being eroded right now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Fillmore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fillmore. I now turn to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for your being with us here today. I will speak to Mr. Witchauer at LKQ. The Federal Trade Commission published a report in the United States in which it asked for your advice. One of the concerns it pointed out was VIN burning that allows a manufacturer to insist that a part works on a single vehicle only. Using this part on another vehicle would be blocked by the embedded software. This is used by General Motors as well as by some European luxury vehicle manufacturers. Do we have such an issue here in Canada? Thank you for the question. I think I will ask my colleague to delve into that.
VIN burning is taking place here as well. And what we're seeing, LKQ, in addition to distributing new parts, aftermarket parts, OEM parts, we are also the largest recycler of cars in the world, recycling over 900,000 cars in North America alone. Oftentimes what we will see is take a side view mirror, for instance. It may be perfectly good and great standing, and it's a very good option to replace a side view mirror, but it has a VIN number that may be burned when you put it on a new car. The mirror no longer is just a mirror, right? It has a motor, it may have a heater, it has sensors. It needs to be able to be properly put on and calibrated. And unfortunately, even though it is a part from the original manufacturer, in many cases, it's not allowed to work properly.
Donc, on comprend que c'est une pratique.
All right, then I see that it's a practice that is found pretty much everywhere. What do you say to manufacturers who say that this bill could also create problems in matters of security or compliance? I think that what counts is to repeat the fact that all that we care about is information about maintenance and repairing of vehicles. We are in no way interested in people's driving habits or other consumer-related data. I think that if we're able to discuss this, I do appreciate the suggestion that cybersecurity officials be brought in on this, and I'm convinced that we'll be able to safely transfer information with no risk to consumers. Thank you. So recycling and reusing material, urban mining has to be carried out correctly, and the automobile market is an important player in a circular economy. How could this legislation help your sector in this regard?
Legislation is a great first step towards a larger right to repair regime, and that's why we are supportive of it. We do think that more needs to be done ultimately, though, to prevent VIN burning and to allow true sharing of that right to repair data.
Et à votre avis que...
And in your opinion, what more could be done to improve recuperation, reusing parts and electronic parts included? Will this enactment, this bill, be useful for that? What more could we do? Reuse of parts generated by 900,000 vehicles that we recycle, that we take apart a year. I think that would have an enormous impact. I think that we're facing a lot of inflationary pressure. I've heard all my colleagues mention our concern for the environment. We are giving a second life to parts that otherwise would turn up in landfills. Second, I think that it's a way to help the entire sector and the consumer, the person who is insured, help them remain safe and be able to repair things in a safe and affordable way. What impact does the new electric vehicle market, what's it likely to have on your sector, and what arrangements will you have with dealerships? Will this create any friction?
Be some impact. These cars will still have to be repaired, though. So a lot of the same issues will continue moving forward. Specifically with recycling. Recycling a battery is going to be very different than recycling an engine, for instance, and that is something we are working on and will be able to do. But as a whole, an electric car is still a car. It's still going to need to be repaired. Those repairs may become more expensive. There are fewer parts in an electric motor, but they do tend to be more expensive. So being able to offer independent repair is going to be increasingly more important as we move into an electrified fleet.
Venant d'une...
Having begun my career in a rural region, I know that access to specialized repair technicians isn't as easy as we would like, especially in the aftermarket. There's also the price factor, the labor shortage right now. How is your sector helping to ensure that services remain available and affordable? I think that no one has escaped the difficulties in the supply chains that we've all had to deal with, face over the last 2 years. We've invested thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands, to ensure that we have a good part inventory at competitive prices, yet safe parts. That's our priority. As we all know, and you're from a rural area, most Canadians don't live in large cities, so access to repairs is indeed an issue for them. We must absolutely think of not only of the 491,000 employees in small businesses, but also other consumers who would need to drive into a city for regular upkeep of their vehicles. You mentioned VIM mining. In Canada, we rotate out our tires, of course. The tire pressure has to be recalibrated every time that's done. All this is becoming very frequent. It's a problem for consumers who need aftermarket assistance. Thank you very much, Mr. Namir. And now to Mr. Williams for 5 minutes.
Follow up on my colleague's question on VIN burning. So how widespread is VIN burning in the auto industry right now?
It's fairly widespread now, and it's something that we see growing. And we think if there's not a true right to repair regime put into place, it's just going to become a greater and greater issue as these cars become more technologically advanced. Each part needs to be able to talk to each other. As I mentioned before, that side view mirror used to just be a mirror, right? And with the average car on the road being 12 years old, it may not impact that car, but the cars that are newer, that have a motor, a sensor, a heater, it's coming into play in those parts.
And how is it possible for VIN burning to spread to other industries? So besides car manufacturing, personal electronics, home appliances, heavy machinery?
I can't speak to that personally, but I would assume so, yes.
Okay. I wanted to get into warranties. So we heard about the right to repair opening up, possibly voiding of warranties. So I think it was only with the horsepower modification. What other instances can warranty be voided based on right to repair?
Yeah, so if a depth delete kit is installed on an off-road, it'd be void there as well too. But it's pretty much any alteration to the manufacturer's OEM specifications or standards voids warranty.
And so what I'm hearing is that we have, customer choice in giving options. So I guess when we're looking at amendments on this on warranties, there's new cars, old cars, new equipment, old equipment. Right to repair seems to be good when something's out of warranty. So when a vehicle is a little older, a piece of equipment's a little older, we need to get that repaired. But a new vehicle, it seems to be where I'm hearing that's where the warranty could be voided. There's environmental implications. Tell me a little bit more about what do you see from this bill partaking to new equipment, older equipment, and the ability for people to get something repaired, whether that's new or old.
So, there's a school of thought in our industry. If you're a customer and you've bought a brand new combine and, one manufacturer's combine runs at $1 million right now, you'd be a fool to alter that in any way to void the warranty because we're not dealing with a consumer electronics or an appliance. The manufacturers are great at honoring their warranty. The dealers typically put the products with warranty at the front of the list in terms of repair because it's
Alors, les véhicules qui ont une bonne garantie sont réparés en premier parce que les concessionnaires veulent privilégier ce genre de clientèle. On ne voit pas vraiment beaucoup de corrélation entre la garantie et le droit à la réparation. Pour nous, c'est comme deux enjeux différents. Le droit d'effectuer une réparation lorsqu'il s'agit de modification, lorsque l'équipement est déjà utilisé, c'est un problème plus important que la question de la garantie. Alors, les clients qui cherchent le droit de réparation pour un ancien équipement, est-ce que c'est problématique? Nous ne le croyons pas parce que le secteur a un engagement envers eux et peut-être...
Plus présentement, est-ce que...
So sorry, Chair, the interpretation was off and this was the interpreter's error. It's now going on the correct channel.
Je regarde le greffier pour voir si la traduction
on me fait
fonctionne.
signe que oui de la part de l'interprète. Je pense que ça va être correct.
All seems to be well. Excuse me, Chair.
Vous pouvez reprendre.
Please continue.
A used piece of equipment, perhaps it is a bigger issue for the right to repair, but that's where the industry has stepped up to that customer or that third-party repair shop to make everything available that a dealer can, that can access to assist in that repair.
The gentleman from LKKQ, any comments on that at all?
I'm not sure how comfortable making the difference between old and new vehicles. Again, we're not advocating for anything that would void the warranty through modification. We just want and are advocating for access to information on any vehicles, new or recent, for the industry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I have 30 seconds or a minute left. I'm just going to cede my time to Bernard Généreux, Mr. Chair.
Merci, mon collègue. Merci aux témoins.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Wilshire, the fact that most of the sector, the aftermarket repair sector, and of course these people are all over Canada, these technicians, with this bill, and, you know, given the reality, how things really work out there in the field, is there going to be an end put to, you know, the corner garage down the street because there's a lack of manpower everywhere, of labor, and the need for local aftermarket services, you know, given the environment, given the price and so on? Is all this going to fall apart? That's a good question. I think I'll give you, speak from the heart. Let me be spontaneous. What we're asking for would actually prevent the erosion of these 491,000 employees' jobs in the secondary aftermarket. So what we're asking for does not put manufacturers' jobs at risk. So that's a good trade-off. If nothing is done, if we don't frame the CASIS, the Canadian Automotive Service Info Standard, differently, then yes, that becomes a threat. Small businesses will not survive. Do I still have any time, Mr. Chair? No, I'm afraid not, Mr. Généreux. Thank you for asking me, and I will now recognize Mr. Longfield, who has 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and very interesting discussion today. I was part of the previous discussion when this was before the industry committee. Mr. Wilshire, where you just left off is something that hits quite close to home. I had a hydraulic repair shop in Winnipeg, and we did repairs on tractors and combines during combining season when there was no time to wait for supply chains to catch up. We had to figure out ways to get tractors going again. Could you speak to what this bill could do to support the improvements to supply chain, especially during critical periods?
Thank you for your question, sir. Again, and I think my colleague Tyler said it best, it's a huge step in the right direction. I think we're going to need more. But I think there's been a lot of talk today about training, about safety. These shops, whether they're mechanical or collision, they have very skilled employees, very dedicated and skilled. AIA has committed a lot of resources to improve training, stay up to speed. At LKQ, we're also committed to that. ICAR has a lot of courses out there. I don't think it's about skills. I really want to bring this back to accessing that dire, important data in a readable fashion that would help these shops just continue to repair vehicles of what nature they may be.
When you talk about the data, and I'm thinking of the J1939 standard, the heavy equipment standard for data, that you could, a lot of the people that are on farms or in rural communities are developing equipment using a standard that then can communicate with their tractors or their power units. Doing things around precision agriculture or even processing of food using a pump that otherwise would be found on a piece of equipment on the field. Having the right to repair would be stimulating innovation in rural communities. Is that something you've had experience with?
I can't comment to that. That's really not my forte, the agricultural industry, but Tyler, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I would say, on the automotive side, that data is the data that is needed to repair and maintain a car. It's something that historically has been available plugging in through the OBD2 port and is now being shut down as it's being transmitted wirelessly.
I worked with a company in Quebec City that was, maybe I shouldn't get too specific, but they were developing computer modules that would then talk to that communication system in order to provide, I'm trying to be as anonymous as I can on this because of the company and the business that they were doing, but they're using that data to do things to interact with other computers that would then signal for other things to happen. Again, there was innovation going on based on the network that was on the machine, but then developing other communication networks to do innovative and complementary tasks. Not having access to that would then stifle innovation.
And we're certainly pro-innovation, right? I think cars are becoming smarter every day, and we want that innovation to continue. And I would say as cars are becoming smarter, a couple things are important. We want the data to be safe. We want it to be transmitted safely. But I also think there are going to be more instances in which that data is necessary. As cars, every car on the road now has sensors everywhere. Right. You're no longer just putting a bumper back on. You have to calibrate those sensors to make sure they work properly because everybody's now used to the beeps going off when they back up out of their driveway. Yeah. And if those are off, you're going to see more accidents. Right. And we need to make sure that's transmitted safely.
Some comments were made around environmental and overriding environmental. Is there other legislation that, I guess maybe that's a question for the other panelists as well, the other legislation that's protecting us against people that are overriding environmental standards?
I think it's also been mentioned that that's currently illegal.
Correct. So there's other laws in place for that. And for the equipment manufacturers, again, I worked in Calgary with one group, in Saskatoon with others. Do you see your equipment being modified in the field and actually improvements made that are then picked up by manufacturers?
Typically, the modification that we see is just for better performance, okay? Increase the horsepower, better fuel economy. So manufacturers and the relationships that they have with dealers are very strict in their opposition to that.
Okay, I've had a different experience, so maybe I can leave that at that because I'm not a panelist. But I'll turn my time back over. I think I'm over time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, you're just in time, Mr. Longfield. Thank you. We'll now turn to Mr. Lemire pour 2 minutes 30.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My next question will be for Mr. Schmeiser. I've also lived in agricultural areas, and I know that many farmers have told us that they have to spend hours, even days, waiting to see a dealer to diagnose their problems. Even more difficult if they have to bring the vehicle to the dealership or if they live far from such an area where there is any sort of technician. It can cost them thousands of dollars. If they try to repair their own equipment on their own, they can face various barriers to that, like voiding of warranties. What should they do? Continue waiting days for official diagnoses?
Example is very real, and that's something that we as equipment dealers want to fix. We do not benefit from our customers being down. We do not benefit from our customers having to wait hours or days upon end, especially in seeding or harvest. We want to get the customer up and running as quickly as possible, and part of the reason why we're in the situation we are, I guess, starts with workforce development, and we can't find enough mechanics to service the equipment that's being sold in the marketplace. But we do have remote diagnostic capabilities on pretty much anything that's been manufactured in the last 5 years. So at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel here where we can diagnose equipment even before a failure takes place, and that ultimately saves the customer a little bit of money. We don't want our technicians running out to the farmer to see something that they have to go back to the dealership to pick up the part and go back. That costs the farmer money, that costs the dealer's reputation. But the only way that we see a solution to that is with more mechanics and better rural broadband.
I'm very sensitive to what you're pointing out here, yet our farmers are good at managing problems, aren't they? They're very inventive. So diagnosing a John Deere equipment, for example, it can cost up to $1,000. That's a big obstacle, a big barrier for many farmers. Why do the manuals as well cost so much? Thousands of dollars. Is there any way that they could be provided with information to help them carry out their own repairs? I think the bill is heading in that direction. I'd like to hear you on this.
The cost, and we're very sympathetic to the cost, because for every dollar that a customer has to spend on something, that's perhaps $1 less that they're going to spend on the purchase of new equipment. The reality is the cost of these items are set by the manufacturer, and the detailer is the retail outlet. We wish that there would be a higher adoption of these special tools and diagnostic equipment that's available to the customers. Our dealers tell us that it's a very low adoption. We think our customers are very resourceful, and if they have the proper tools that we provide in their hands, they can do a lot more repairs than what they're doing right now.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. We have a little time left. I know that Mr. Généreux, you had further questions. Could we just turn to you for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes? Thank you, Chair. This is very generous. Mr. Schmeiler, I have two big, farming farmers in my village, and you've told us that the parts, that's about 70% of your business. That means that it's not necessarily yourself who install all these parts. I know that these big farming concerns have enormous garages, as big as an arena, and they carry out their own repairs with qualified technicians right there. They buy parts and carry out the repairs on their farms. So how useful is it for you to work with these sorts of people, keeping people as autonomous as possible so that they can carry out repairs as quickly as possible? However, you're in the business of carrying out repairs. So is there some sort of contradiction here? What's your view?
Do all of the repairs that are needed by the customers because of workforce development issues, because of the number of mechanics that we have. So we maintain it is in our best interest to make sure that third-party repair shops have the parts, have access to the tools and diagnostic equipment that they need, or in your situation, a large customer, absolutely, a dealer will quickly realize it's in his best interest to make that stuff available, the special tools, the diagnostic equipment, and the parts available to that large customer so they can do their own repairs.
Mais qu'en est-il
what happens to the guarantees then, the warranties? I mean, because $1 million tractor, that's about what a tractor costs these days. That's the average. How long does a warranty on that last? And how long could a person be able to repair their own tractor under warranty?
We have legislation in place that guarantees the customer a 1-year minimum warranty on the purchase of new farm equipment. That varies by province, but it's pretty much the standard in the industry. But the manufacturers go beyond. As an example, that combine I referred to a little bit earlier, the manufacturer has a 3-year warranty, a 3-year aftermarket service support with that. But in actual practicality, what happens is if it's a piece of equipment that's under warranty, the dealer will address that first with their manpower, because that's their customer that has just purchased new, who's made that major investment. So our warranty customers always get high priority.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Généreux.
Thank you very much, Mr. Généreux and Mr. Schmeiser. I will now turn to Mr. Don Vitt for 2 minutes.
Mr. Kingston, what steps do your members currently take to ensure an adequate supply of automobile components and repair products that consumer can purchase to repair their vehicles?
CVMA members, through their participation in cases, provide the exact same information and tools to the aftermarket as they do to their dealership network. there's no difference whatsoever. And that is to ensure that consumers can get their repair done where they wish up to the OEM standard.
For the record, do your members support or oppose the third-party manufacturing and the sales of repair parts for vehicles that your members produce?
Sorry, oppose the third-party?
Do your members support or oppose third-party manufacturing of parts that can be used for repairs, third-party repairs? And
we support repair as well, as long as it's done up to the standard that the manufacturer has deemed through cases.
And do your members support or oppose the right to repair and modify?
Under this bill, or?
In general.
We support repair being done up to the OEM standard through cases, which is a very highly functional system that we have in place today.
If there's any possibility of amendment, or I'm sure there's opportunity for amendments, what would you suggest to this committee?
Well, first and foremost, we don't think that this is necessary to apply to the automotive industry because we have this standard in place, which has been successful, and I would argue is an example for other industries to follow. This framework is unique, and it's been established. It's working very well right now, and it continues to be improved. So we don't think that this is necessary, this type of legislation, for the automotive industry.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, MP Dong, and thanks to all of our witnesses for taking the time today to inform the work of this committee. Much appreciated. I will now suspend the meeting for a few minutes. Meeting of the INDU committee. And with us for the second panel, we have from the Canadian Automobile Association, Jason Kerr, Senior Director for Government Relations, as well as Yann Jack, Vice President Public Affairs. Nous avons aussi de MedTech Canada par vidéo.
We also have from MedTech Canada by video conference Raj Malik, who's Vice President Affaires Fédérales et Partenariats Stratégiques Nationaux, and Mia Spiegelman, Vice President Regulatory Affairs. Thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, I will recognize Mr. Kerr from the Canadian Automobile Association. Indeed, Mr. Chair, it will be Ian Jack who will be presenting our opening remarks, at least at the outset.
Monsieur le Président, honorable député, merci pour l'invitation.
Thank you for the invitation, Chair and honourable members, for having us here today to discuss this topic.
As noted, my name is Ian Jack, VP of Public Affairs. With me, Jason Kerr, our Managing Director of Government Relations. Most of you, of course, will be familiar with our brand. Founded in 1913, the Canadian Automobile Association is a federation of 8 clubs providing more than 6.8 million Canadians, coast to coast, with emergency roadside assistance, as well as automotive, insurance, rewards, and travel services. Importantly, CAA is also a not-for-profit that has always advocated on issues of concern to its members. Today, those issues include road safety, the environment, mobility, infrastructure, and consumer protection, which is why we're here today. Why do we care about digital locks at CAA? The answer is simple. We want Canadians to have access to reasonably priced vehicle repairs. To do that, we need competition in the marketplace. That competition will come from local garages that have been a staple of all of our communities since time immemorial. We need to ensure their future health. Why do we think vehicles are worth taking note of in a discussion about a law of general applicability? Because vehicles and vehicle repairs are the most expensive thing most consumers will buy to which digital locks might apply. Not your iPhone, not your toaster oven, your vehicle. We view this legislation as ensuring technological neutrality, making sure the underlying principles of the existing legislation are respected as technology advances. Time was, mechanics with the proper tools could fix your vehicle. You had options as to where to buy those tools. Now, however, software, including diagnostic software, is king across most industries, including automotive. This has given various industries the opportunity to slap an electronic padlock on their products, to the detriment of consumer choice and price competition on repair. We don't think this is right, for consumers of vehicle repair at any rate. If restrictions are in place that prevent access to a vehicle software that supports maintaining and servicing that vehicle, Canadians are left with limited options if their vehicle breaks down or is in a collision. They would have little choice but to go through their dealership. That's fine if that's what you want as a consumer, but Canadians should have the right to bring their vehicles to a garage of their choosing. As we've recently been reminded, prices do tend to go up over time. More competition will help with affordability. We'd also point out that not everyone lives a short drive from a dealership. Access to convenient and reasonably priced service should not be limited to those in big cities. In our view, it is important to ensure that those in the aftermarket attempting to diagnose, maintain, and repair vehicles do not face obstacles such as technological protection measures that could restrict competition. Indeed, in recent national opinion polling, CAA has found that a significant majority of Canadians agree that independent garages should have guaranteed access to manufacturers' software to diagnose and repair vehicles. Bill C-244 is attempting to address a potential barrier to repairability, and one that will help promote price discipline for consumers. For this reason, we support this bill. We're further hopeful that passage of the bill would encourage automakers and the aftermarket to come together to outline the gaps in availability of repair data and its accessibility and address them for today and for the vehicle of the future. That would be good for Canadian vehicle owners by ensuring future convenience, choice, and price competition. Merci encore pour l'invitation.
Thanks again for the invitation to speak to you today.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jack will now move to MedTech for 5 minutes. And Mr. Malik, I believe you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the INDU Committee. On behalf of MedTech Canada, we're grateful to have the opportunity to participate in the committee's review of Bill C-244. My name is Raj Malik, and I'm the Vice President of Federal Affairs for MedTech Canada. Joining me today is Mia Spiegelman, MedTech Canada's Vice President of Regulatory Affairs. MedTech Canada is a national association representing Canada's innovative medical technology industry. We represent approximately 120 member companies that range from small, emerging medtech companies to large multinationals serving the Canadian market, collectively employing over 35,000 Canadians. Medical devices range from the smallest technologies, such as pacemakers, to the largest of diagnostic imaging technologies, such as MRIs, and everything in between. With our time at the committee today, I would like to share some insights on the current regulations under which the medtech industry operates and how this relates to our recommendations for Bill C-244 to ensure that protections for patients and healthcare providers are upheld. Our primary concern with the proposed amendments to the Copyright Act in Bill C-244 is that this would allow for the access to highly sensitive medical technology software by unregulated and untrained service providers. In addition, the amendments would allow for the creation of uncontrolled and unregulated service parts for medical devices, leading to potential patient or healthcare provider harm. To be clear, our industry continues to support the availability of federally regulated third-party entities to service and repair medical devices. We know this is critical to the functioning of the Canadian healthcare system. Medical devices in Canada are heavily regulated by our federal government. Most medical devices undergo a rigorous licensing process, which ensures that the medical devices sold in Canada are safe for use, and this includes any related software and accessories. In addition, most facilities or organizations that handle medical devices throughout the supply chain are also regulated, such as hospitals, manufacturers, importers, distributors, and regulated third-party service providers that fall under their umbrella. Through this network, we ensure that throughout the life cycle of a medical device, which can range anywhere from 7 to 15 years, the device remains as effective and safe as the day it was approved for sale into Canada. At this time, third-party service providers who only provide a service of repair are not covered under any government quality assurance regulations, which leaves very little protection for our patient and healthcare provider populations. As an example of federal safeguards, Vanessa's Law, Protecting Canadians from Unsafe Drugs Act, was passed in 2014. This legislation was brought forward by the Oakville MP at the time, Terrence Young, following the death of his 15-year-old daughter Vanessa in 2000, while she used a prescribed therapeutic product as intended, but suffered an adverse reaction. Vanessa's Law was enacted to further tighten the post-market surveillance and oversight of therapeutic products. As of 2019, manufacturers, importers, and other companies across the supply chain are now required to further analyze and/or gather reports on risks and issues identified after the medical device was sold into the Canadian market. Unregulated third-party service providers, on the other hand, are not currently captured under these requirements. Additionally, unregulated service providers today are not required by Health Canada to adhere to any standard procedures such as proper training of personnel, evaluating part suppliers, calibrating tools, maintaining device service and preventive maintenance records, or maintaining device design. The current Copyright Act prevents unregulated third-party servicers from both circumventing technical protection measures, TPMs, in our medical devices, as well as replacement of untested or unapproved repair parts. These protection measures ensure that only highly trained and authorized service providers can access this highly sensitive technology to perform the necessary repairs. These protections are in place to lower the risk of impacting device effectiveness and the risk of causing serious medical harm to patients. When it comes to medical devices, TPMs are vital to the safety of patients and healthcare providers, as they are an integral part of what Health Canada reviews during the licensing process. TPMs ensure the device functions properly, alarms appropriately, and that malicious actors cannot access patient data. If TPMs are bypassed and software modified improperly, service medical equipment can malfunction, causing risk to patients and technicians. In conclusion, as medical devices are heavily regulated products requiring licenses and adhering to robust safety standards, including aftermarket surveillance and reporting requirements, allowing access to unregulated third-party servicers undermines existing safety measures that today protect patients and our healthcare providers. On behalf of Canada's medical technology industry, we strongly recommend that medical devices and technologies regulated for sale by Health Canada be provided a specific exemption in any proposed amendments to the Copyright Act. Thank you, and we'll be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. We'll now turn to MP Viss for 6 minutes.
No, that's me. Ça va être moi qui va prendre le premier tour, monsieur.
I will begin, Mr. Chair, if I may. Very good, Mr. Généreux. Mr. Vernick Malik, could you explain the link between this bill and the unfortunate passing of the daughter of Terrence Young? I remember that case was known to my prior colleague. So what is the link to medical equipment and then the link to this enactment?
Colleague to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Malik. So Vanessa's Law, when it was enacted, it has different sections to it. And one of them, it talks about safety of the medical device throughout its life cycle. And as Mr. Malik mentioned, it could be 7 to 15 years. In the medical device industry, how they enacted it or how they implemented it is that now manufacturers, importers, distributors, and regulated third-party service providers are required to provide annual summary reports or run annual summary reports around adverse events, and also if the adverse events cause unintended increased risk, they have to report it to Health Canada. There's other such reports that are now required for medical device regulations. In regards to the Act and how it's linked is that, as mentioned by Mr. Malik, third-party service providers that are not regulated do not have this requirement, and therefore there is a gap in this area, and this has been brought up as well to Health Canada's eyes. Thank you.
So, dans cet ordre d'idée, est-ce que vous avez...
So in the same line of thought, have you suggested any amendments, or would you like to do so for this bill so that third-party service providers, those repairing these devices, might, be regulated by the same approaches, regulations, basically, have the same responsibilities? Because your intention sounds quite good, but are you going to put forward any possible amendments for us?
Go ahead, Mr. Malik.
I was just going to say yes. We will be putting forward an amendment to that respect.
Yeah.
Okay, merci.
Good, thank you.
Wait, go ahead.
So I was going to mention, as an addition, we had provided this feedback as well to Health Canada around this area.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, for Canadian Automobile Association, you work in Quebec, across Canada, 7,000 members. You're well known, so you're representing all these people today, and you approve this enactment. Do you intend to suggest any changes that we should make to it, or do you think that it's good to go as is? Would you like to have it improved? I'm just looking for the right word in French. I'm sorry, I've got too many people speaking English in my household. Forgive me. Go ahead.
Have we presented any amendments? No. Are we happy with the law as written? Yes. Do we acknowledge that, and it may be our colleagues here, could there be some legitimate exemptions that should be considered? Sure. I'm not an expert in medical technology, and I wouldn't try to speak for them. I would say, if I could, two things about any exemption process that the committee might consider through amendment. The first is that every industry will line up and claim that it is worthy of an exemption. Some will actually be worthy. Some may be less worthy. I think this committee from time to time probably hears from the brand name and generic pharmaceutical industries, and you will know that they just spend all their time in court and arguing over how long various periods should be. And I would hope the committee would want to avoid that in any amendments it might consider on this. And so think carefully about how to narrow the possibility of getting an exemption. And if I may, sir, just there was a prior testimony that perhaps those who want to circumvent a digital lock should have to make their case. I would suggest the onus should be the other way around. If you are about to pass a law of general applicability that allows this for the circumvention of digital locks for legitimate purposes, it should be the industry that says, no, you can't touch our software, that should have to make its case. Thank you.
Je comprends ce que vous me dites. Moi,
I understand that. My concern when we hear witnesses here before us, and based on what they've told us, is that we're, going to see the local garages be shutting down. The types of people that I have in my riding who service our vehicles. Very difficult to accept that if we see that VIM burning is going to be an issue. And yes, we can easily see that original manufacturers can really control their works in a much more effective way than they did in the past. So is this a real worry? Am I right to be worried that if we don't make any changes, then we'll be losing our little local garages across the country?
That's why we support this legislation. We think it would be, in terms of our industry, a small step forward in making sure that we don't end up in that huis clos where you have to go to the dealer, and the dealer may be 200, 300, 400 kilometers away, depending on the vehicle that you've purchased. If I may as well, I would say, cases, and we hear about cases. To me, it's a perfect example of another piège that I would encourage the committee to think about in any amendments that it considers. What a wonderful story that the automotive industry and the aftermarket voluntarily got together, made an agreement to share information 15 years ago. Well, since then, and it's unfortunate that Mr. Messe is not here today because he's been, I think, on this committee forever, and could tell you that year after year after year, the same story is heard, which is one side says CASIS is wonderful and working perfectly, the other side says it's irreparably broken. What is the truth of the matter? We're a third party in this. We don't have line of sight either. Because that voluntary agreement has no review mechanism, no audit mechanism, there's no third party who looks at it to whom anybody can go to review it. That's why we end up in that situation today. So we have heard talk, and we could accept voluntary agreements to share information among industries potentially in order to not be subject to 244. We think that's where some would like to go with this, but we would urge some caution there. If that's where we end up, we think that we need to make sure, whether it's ISED, some other body, is doing a regular review. If a party to a voluntary agreement has an issue with it, what are they supposed to do about it? Again, that's why we don't like that, what we would consider reverse onus from a previous witness. There's an imbalance here of economic power between an OEM and most in the aftermarket. Our friends at LTQ? LKQ. Yes, they may have a bit of money, but they don't have as much money as the multinational auto companies, and anybody else in that industry is going to be even smaller. And so to ask somebody like that to have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of lawyers and spend years in court to argue about whether they should have access to us would be a mistake.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Jack. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacques and Mr. Généreux. And now I recognize Ms. Lapointe, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jack, you had mentioned in your opening statement that your association had done some polling of its members, and that a significant number of Canadians indicated their concerns with limited options and lack of choice. So can you tell us more about what you heard from members around this?
Absolutely, and not just members, I might add. So we have 6.8 million members, but when we do polling, we poll all Canadians on this. We ask them if they're a member, so we know what the difference is, if there is one. There isn't on this issue. Over 2/3 of Canadians support the right of the independent repair industry through garages to have access to that software. And again, you'll hear differing stories about how easy that access is and how complete that access is today. In our view, the bill before you is ensuring that we don't have another impediment, and it's about ensuring that in the future this doesn't become, that digital locks don't become an impediment. And I think to the point made by Monsieur Généreux, the industry is getting tighter and tighter and tougher and more technologically driven, and the importance to the OEMs of the repair model and therefore that software is only going to grow and grow with time. We already see when new manufacturers come along, like Tesla, they don't use dealerships. They're company-owned. That's been a long-term trend in the industry. I think it would be fair to say that if the OEMs were creating the industry from scratch today, they wouldn't set up independent dealer networks that they end up getting it, So one of the things they love about wireless transmission of data is that it allows them to, for the first time ever, to establish a direct binary relationship with the owner of a vehicle. If you think about it, I would suggest most of us have a relationship, if it's a new vehicle, with a dealership, if not with a repair a garage, not with the OEM itself. That's partly what this is about, this brave new world for the manufacturers. And so we think their pressure will only increase to hold that data, and we want to make sure that it's more widely available, as we said, to the benefit of consumers, in particular on price when it comes to repair.
So this isn't a uniquely Canadian issue. And are there any international examples that we could look to or refer to regarding the impact of this bill? I'm thinking in particular of countries like the US or Australia.
Yes, and my colleague Jason can speak more to this. He, for for his sins is on a quarterly call at 6 a.m. so we can all be awake at the same time, the Australians, the Europeans, us, and so on, and the Europeans. And so we talk regularly about this issue and do monitor the international situation. And I think it's, from our perspective at least, fair to say that internationally the auto industry tends to line up to slow down any access to data. This has been the example in Massachusetts, where a citizens' bill or citizens' referendum was passed and so on. But maybe let me turn it over to Jason for just a little bit more on that.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so in Australia, there has been an agreement. The agreement is not really working very well and has been delayed for many, many years. There are no manufacturers that make vehicles that are based in Australia, and that actually has been quite an impediment. So they don't pay quite a lot of attention to the rules. Things have been quite delayed there. Where else? The EU, is still working on their law. They're still working through things on right to repair. They do not have a right to repair bill per se at this moment. I can't say that there's anything that they've done on digital locks that I can think of. I can check on that and get back to you, Ms. Lapointe. Also, in the United States, as my colleague Mr. Jack mentioned, there is a bill that's been passed in Massachusetts to allow for right to repair. There is a movement to try to pass a federal or a national right to repair piece of legislation, so there's not a patchwork of legislation across the states. However, it is being held up at great length by the manufacturers, and in fact, the manufacturers spent close to $25 million on an advertising campaign to push back on right to repair in advance of that referendum that just happened, I think, a couple of years ago now. So, I think what we can say is that the right to repair bill that occurred here 15 years ago in Canada, it was voluntary, but it actually was the first of its kind in the world. And it was great to see that it happened. It was great to see that everyone came together. But what there wasn't is an oversight mechanism. There wasn't anything, no one, it was in control to come back and say, if it's not working, who's going to do something about it? And what we have today is we have one side of the sector that says it's not working, and then we have the automobile manufacturers that say everything's working perfectly. And it's not necessarily our place to sit here and tell you it is or isn't working, but clearly there's a gap, and clearly there's a mechanism that should have been put in place that wasn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Mr. Malik, I'd like to pick up on where my colleague Bernard Généreux was talking to you about some of the amendments you may be proposing. So we know that there are concerns that right to repair may lead to some safety risks with medical devices. I believe in your statement you stated that it has the potential to undermine the safety of medical devices. So in your estimation, are there specific category of medical devices that you would exclude, that you would like to see excluded from this bill?
So let me start, and then I'll ask my colleague to weigh in. As you're probably aware, medical devices in Canada are classified according to category and level of invasiveness. There are a number of medical devices that do not require any sort of repair or maintenance, and that would include products such as needles, syringes, bandages. All of those would be excluded. For devices where there is a hardware or software component to them, those would be the ones where we would be most concerned that there would be a safety risk.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, so in addition to what my colleague mentioned, fully aligned with his feedback, as well as any medical device that has a software or a hardware or a combination of both of them would be something we would seek exclusion, because it doesn't have to be a specific MRI machine or any high-tech device. It could be a blood pressure cuff that you have at home to monitor your blood pressure, for which you have high blood pressure, for example. So for us, it's any medical device that is not like a single use or sterile, that has an equipment or a software or a combination that would need to be serviced, maintained, or repaired.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Lapointe.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lapointe. I now recognize Mr. Lemire. Mr. Lemire, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Jack to begin with. Thank you for making an effort to speak French. Much appreciated. I have a question about Insurances. One of the main arguments we hear against having owners repair their own vehicles is that there's no safety guarantee. Is this a concern for your organization? What do you think are the biggest challenges when it comes to insurances, and what sort of solutions might we offer there?
Jason in a moment, but I think I'd start by saying that these repairs are legal today. Right, and it's very limited circumstances under which the warranty would be void. The piece of legislation before us today is to, in our view, to ensure that digital locks are not used as a new way to start blocking the access that is legal, and that, to hear our friends in the industry, has been available for 15 years. And so I'm not sure. No, I don't think we do share that concern. Jason, anything to add on that?
Only that in fact, our colleagues on the previous panel from the CVMA spoke about the fact that the access to data is necessary in order to repair a vehicle to the proper specifications, as it should be. That can be done by an aftermarket repairer today. So no, I don't think it's about making sure that they have the right information and the right data that they need to diagnose and to fix a vehicle, but I don't think that there's any safety risk there.
L'Assemblée nationale du Québec.
Quebec's National Assembly has dealt with 177, which has forbidden setting a standard for repairability, at least being able to mark people against a checklist. Do you think this is a problem? The programmed obsolescence, which this affects, and would a federal legislation addressing planned obsolescence be helpful, do you think? You're putting very interesting questions, sir.
Time thinking about this. My initial reaction would be that no, we're not concerned, I think, about programmed obsolescence. I think that it's in the automaker's interest as well to keep that software as up-to-date as they can. And indeed, these days, they all see themselves in competition with Tesla and other potential new manufacturers. And so, if anything, the auto industry is trying to remake itself as a tech industry these days. But Jason, maybe I've missed something.
Yeah, no, I would only add that vehicles on the road today average in age at about 12 years. So, I mean, these vehicles have been around for a while. I don't think it's the same kind of planned obsolescence issue that you have maybe with toasters or other products. I think in vehicles, they're designed to last. I mean, people drive cars until they're 20 years old as long as they properly maintain them. So I don't think that's particularly an issue of our perspective from the vehicle side of things, but could very well be
I mean, I would say the access to the software to keep them up to date est primordial, évidemment, dans cette situation. So.
Yes, that's a problem.
Question au panel précédent sur le VN burning. Donc, qu'un fabricant peut contraindre une pièce à ne fonctionner que sur une seule voiture. Et est-ce que ça, c'est une situation que vous voyez qui est répandue pour vous dans l'industrie automobile? Et est-ce qu'on devrait contrer cette pratique-là davantage?
This be countered. We were mentioning that VIM burning is a big issue. VIM burning is a big issue. Can it be countered? Should we prevent it?
We were scratching our heads at the back of the room, I have to say, when that came up. That's not something that's come across our radar, I must admit. We will inform ourselves further of it, but I would have thought we would have heard more about that if it was a big issue.
What would you say to OEMs that this bill could cause problems when it comes to safety of the parts?
Legislation. Access is not only allowed, but according to the CVMA itself, encouraged these days under CASIS. It's not an issue today. This would not alter in any way what's available today. This is about repairability. As our colleagues from the aftermarket said as well on the previous panel, this is not about an interest in any of the other data that's involved. It's about being able to repair vehicles in 10 years from now, the same way they can be repaired today and that they were able to be repaired 10, 20, and 50 years ago. We're trying to preserve, in a sense, the status quo as the technology advances, not change those rules of the game.
Évolution technologique nous amène vers les véhicules.
So this technological change is leading us to the new world of electrical vehicles? Do you think this will make it even more complicated for electric vehicle owners? And given all the technology involved, will this cause more problems, or will this give more power to the manufacturers so that they will be the repair shop of choice?
Vehicles are becoming more and more technologically dependent, regardless of what the drivetrain is. EVs are part of that trend, of course, but I think if EVs hadn't been invented, we weren't worried about the climate, and we were just dealing with the vehicles that from the past, the technological evolution would still come to a point where already today, you need access to software to repair any vehicle that's on the road. And that trend will continue and will accelerate. More and more is diagnosed and then repaired via software, less and less by wielding a hammer under the hood of the vehicle, like in the old days. So that trend will continue, absolutely.
Merci pour votre témoignage. Merci pour l'image également.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for such colorful testimony, really. Thank you, Mr. Jack and Mr. Demir. And I now turn the floor over to Brad Viss for 5 minutes.
Directed towards Mr. Malik and Ms. Spiegelman. So Section 2 of the Copyright Act already and explicitly includes computer programs in the definition of a literary work. In your opinion, why does Clause 1 of Bill C-244 therefore propose to specify that a computer program is a work? What's the implications of that?
I'm going to try to explain our concerns around Part 2. Is that your question? Sorry if you can paraphrase.
Basically, what I'm trying to get at, would enacting this clause in like the amendment to the Copyright Act in paragraph 1 shed doubt on the protection of computer programs under the Act?
I can only speak to the impact that these two clauses have on regulated medical devices. We have equal concern of Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 specifically around the parts, components. As you know, some medical devices, some components go in contact with humans like blood and solutions that go into human patients, and that would be something that we would be concerned equally as going into software, as mentioned in Part 1. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but if not, please feel free to paraphrase.
Okay, I'll try another one. Section 41.21 of the Copyright Act allows the Governor and Council to make regulations to change some aspects of the Act's anti-circumvention framework, including by prescribing further exemptions to anti-circumvention rules. How is allowing a person to circumvent a technological protection measure to diagnose, maintain, or repair a product through legislation superior to doing it through the current regulatory approach?
So the current, as mentioned, an example we provided was Vanessa's law. The current law requires regulated industry to provide certain reporting. For example, if there is a death or near death, you have to report to the government in 10 days if there was a death and near death, or should it reoccur in 30 days. This is an example. Vanessa's law added to that in that they have to do yearly reporting, etc. Our concern is around this amendment enabling or reducing the protections that our patients and healthcare providers have today in the unregulated industry, which is not covered on the requirements. Neither are they required to submit a 10-day reportable, a 30-day reportable, any testing around these parts that were created, any summary reports. So our concern is around the reduction of the protections for the unregulated industry today.
Okay, so generally the do-it-yourself approach to diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of products that could be covered under this bill if it is passed is problematic to your industry?
It's problematic to our patients and our healthcare providers and to Health Canada to ensure ongoing safety monitoring of our patients.
Thank you. How much time left, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you have about a minute and a half.
Okay. Computer programs embedded in products are typically licensed to consumers. To retain the right to use the program, they usually must comply with license, which may require that they do not circumvent TPMs for any reason. A person could thus breach the license, losing the right to use the program, even if, in this case, the Copyright Act otherwise allows them to circumvent the technological protection measure. Given that provinces have legislative powers over contract law, should the federal government engage with them on the matter of restrictive licenses in the context of C244, obviously?
Is that for us, Mr. Wiss?
All my questions were directed to you.
Yes. So as you know, healthcare in this country is a provincial responsibility. There's funding from both the provinces and the federal government. I would imagine that right to repair legislation probably would land in the purview of the provinces. But what we're requesting is that for federally regulated medical devices, that there be either an exception or an amendment to ensure that these devices are repaired by trained individuals who have access to the proper parts and the proper training. Does that answer your question?
It does partly. I'm kind of on the fence about this bill right now. I think it's so broad. I see the merits of it for some industries, and then for others, I think we're opening up a can of worms. And generally, my rule of thumb is that I don't want to try to fix something that's not broken. And so it applies so differently to all the different witnesses we're hearing today. And what I'm trying to get at is the complexity of broad-based legislation like this that doesn't exist in other jurisdictions necessarily, and the implications of that. And that's why I was asking those specific questions that were so generously provided by our analysts.
So maybe if I could just expand on my answer then. For medical technologies and medical devices, as I said, they are federally regulated. And if we're looking for specific carve-outs, then I guess that would be our recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. And Mr. Viss will now turn to MP Dong for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank all the witnesses for coming today. And I just want to say that, Mr. Jack, Ms. Kerr, your testimony was very much valued. And actually, I think it's good for us to hear different perspectives on this bill. Having said that, earlier today we heard that, from witnesses that raised concerns regarding the impact of this bill on safety and environmental concerns. What's your view on how this bill would impact safety of our roads and environmental standards?
It's a very good question. We care a lot about. Oh, it comes on automatically. We care a lot about both of those issues. It's a very good question. Thank you for it. I would say a few things. First of all, we've also heard testimony that this is happening anyway, regardless of this legislation. So right now you have people, going onto the dark web and various corners of the internet to downware pirated pieces of software to do some of this themselves. We think that this legislation would surface that, bring it hopefully into the legal market. So that's one thing we would say about it. We think there are, as we've also heard, environmental laws. They should absolutely be enforced, but these are amendments to the Copyright Act, not to environmental. And I don't think we want environment to Mr. Viz's comment. I don't think that it's already broad enough. I don't think we need to be putting environmental concerns into this bill at the same time. That should be dealt with under environmental legislation. And we are not particularly concerned about road safety aspects of this because, again, we're talking about legitimate software that is already being used to repair vehicles by legitimate players in the industry, and just making sure through these amendments, this C244, that we don't put a new block in place, a new padlock, if you will, on access to that software.
Well, thank you for that. You know, although it may be true that it's happening anyways, people are getting, you know, information or figure out a way to circumvent it. I think making a law and making it legal, it's very different, because laws, as we understand it, sets a very, very minimum standard of our expectation of what's happening in the industry or in the society. And making a law, basically you're sending a strong signal that it is allowed, and people would be able to do that. For legitimate legal purposes.
That wouldn't change whether somebody's doing something illegal.
And on the environmental impact, thank you very much for your response. I can't help to think that, you know, one of my colleagues mentioned earlier that Australia is doing something, United States is doing something, and I too want to thank the analysts for doing the research. You know, in the Australian case, in 2021, they tried to amend the Competition and Consumer Act to establish a scheme that mandate all services and repair information provided to car dealership networks and manufacturer-preferred repairers to make available for independent repairs and to registered training organizations to purchase. So obviously that's a different path they're taking. We're fixing, or not we're, this bill is intended to fix the copyright aspect of things to pave ground for other laws. So you know, that, at least I think that's what I see. What's your comment on that, comparing the two approaches, what the Australian is doing and what we're doing here in the committee?
Well, I think we'd agree with your interpretation that, and as an earlier witness said as well, to the extent there are issues with cases, this will not fix them. What it will do is ensure that another roadblock isn't put up in the future. So we see this as one step forward. As I said in the opening remarks, we hope that again, surfacing this issue and having this testimony from various players in our particular industry will perhaps cause the committee to take a renewed interest in the overall issue. And I do think that the cases example is very pertinent, as I said, to any amendments you may be considering here, because if amendments are done so that people can do voluntary agreements, but there's no oversight of those agreements once signed, you end up in the same situation. And you'll have a parade, I would predict a parade of industries coming before this committee in coming years to complain about, from one side or the other, that the agreement is not being respected. And there'll be nobody to arbitrate that dispute.
I very much agree with your comment on a review and audit mechanism to be built. And however this bill will look like, you know, at the end of a series of amendments, would you still recommend a review and audit mechanism to be building this bill?
Yes. Okay. We absolutely would. And again, I think cases is a perfect example of with great goodwill, something was entered into 15 years ago. When people start disputing it, though, if it's just floating out there as a semi-private agreement, there's no way to fix it. And the consumer is ultimately who gets hurt in that situation.
Any thoughts on how long that cycle should be? Is it a 2-year review period, a 5-year review period? I'm just
we'd split the difference and say 3, actually.
Okay.
I think 2 is very short, and we are not interested in setting up a big new bureaucracy.
Right.
5 can be very long, though, in an industry. 5 years.
And would you say that review audit process to be specified in the regulatory process, or actually should be built in the legislative process?
We'll leave that to your legislative council. I don't have advice on legally where the best place for that is we would say, as long as it's there. I mean, so legislation, of course, would be better in that respect. That then, right, there'd have to be regulation made to follow that. I'll make one other broader point, if I may. My colleagues inside the department won't like this very much, but I started writing about right to repair as a journalist in 1999. I've been around this for a long time. And one of the things that happened many years ago is that Industry Canada was slammed together out of a bunch of different departments. It is responsible for attracting and keeping automotive investment in this country. It's also responsible for the Copyright Act, as you would know. It's also responsible for consumer affairs. My experience over the years has been that one of those things is considered more important than the others to the department. I understand that. Again, Mr. Mass isn't here to pipe up for the auto workers of Windsor, but I'm sure he would, were he. I get that. But it is a fact that when there are competing interests inside the department, it is not always, at the end of the day, the consumer interest that triumphs. That may be understandable, but I think that if there's a legislative mandate, it makes it harder for the department not to do anything. And indeed, my understanding is there is a mechanism for exemptions under the Copyright Act, and it hasn't been used regulatorily, and it hasn't been granted once in 10 years. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jack. And Mr. Dunn will now turn to Monsieur Lemire pour 2 minutes 30.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be for the MedTech witnesses, Mr. Malik, Ms. Spiegelman. According to some reports, during the pandemic, hospitals complained that it took too long to get essential ventilation equipment repaired because only the OEM could carry out the repairs, the original equipment manufacturer. Did you see something like this? And was the slowdown in repairs affecting the health system, and are they still affecting the health system?
During the pandemic, our medical device manufacturers, I think, went above and beyond in terms of ensuring that there was a production of ventilators, testing kits, as well as other medical technologies required to battle the pandemic. We did not hear of any customers who were complaining that their medical products, specifically ventilators, were not repaired on time. Mia, anything else to add?
No, thank you, Raj. Along with what you mentioned, we have not heard of such concerns. In fact, some companies, as you mentioned, went above and beyond and posted, I believe, the designs for their ventilators for others to use. So if anything, we saw huge collaborations during COVID. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add as well that when it comes to servicing products within a hospital, a number of provinces, in fact, most provinces, have in-house technical service organizations already present. And so not only do they have the original equipment manufacturer as a repair of those devices, but they also have their in-house organizations that are trained by the OEMs.
And if I can just add one more piece following to what you mentioned, Raj, we fully support regulated third-party servicing of medical devices is integral to our healthcare. However, our concern, again, is that the regulations.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire, and thank you to all our witnesses. This concludes our second hour. Thank you so much for having made yourselves available to assist us with our work. Greatly appreciated. Thank you to the analysts, to the interpreters, to the clerk, all our support staff. And I adjourn the meeting.